What if I told you that sleeping more is actually making your exhaustion worse? There are people sleeping 10, 12, even 14 hours a night, and waking up feeling like they haven't slept at all. Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because their brain's sleep pressure system is broken at a neurological level. And here's the part that changes everything. There is now an FDA-approved treatment for this condition. But the average person waits 8 years to get diagnosed. Today I'm going to show you exactly what's happening inside the brain, why more sleep makes it worse, and the 8 steps that actually help. Plus, I'm going to reveal the one emerging treatment that could change this condition entirely. Stick with me. You already know this feeling. You go to bed at a reasonable hour. You wake up 9, 10 hours later. And instead of feeling rested, you feel like you've been hit by a truck. You've probably tried everything. Blackout curtains, no screens before bed, chamomile tea, magnesium, earlier bedtimes, later bedtimes. Nothing works. Because the problem isn't your sleep habits. The problem is a condition called idiopathic hypersomnia. Idiopathic means no obvious external cause. Hypersomnia means excessive sleep. It affects roughly 1 in 2,000 people. It typically begins in the teenage years, and the average person with this condition goes 8 years before anyone figures out what's actually wrong with them. 8 years of being told you're just tired. 8 years of doctors suggesting you try going to bed earlier. 8 years of people assuming you're lazy, or depressed, or not trying hard enough. That's the hidden weight of this condition. And here's the part I want you to hold on to. That exhaustion, that feeling of being broken, of wondering if you'll ever have enough energy again. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system sending you a signal that something is genuinely wrong at a biological level. But before I can show you what to do about it, I need to show you something that most sleep doctors don't even fully understand. Because once you see how sleep pressure works in a healthy brain, and how it breaks in idiopathic hypersomnia, everything else clicks into place. Your brain runs on a system with 2 separate clocks. The first is your circadian rhythm, the 24-hour internal clock that tells your body when it's day and when it's night. You've heard of that one. But the second clock is the one nobody talks about, and it's the one that's broken in idiopathic hypersomnia. Scientists call it the homeostatic sleep drive, or process S. And it works like this. Every minute you're awake, your brain is burning energy. And as it burns energy, it releases a molecule called adenosine. Adenosine builds up in your brain like sand filling an hourglass. The longer you've been awake, the more adenosine you have, and the more intense your pressure to sleep becomes. By evening, after 16 hours awake, your adenosine levels are so high that your brain essentially forces you into deep, restorative sleep. And during that sleep, specifically during your deep, slow-wave sleep, your brain clears the adenosine. The hourglass flips. You wake up with clean, empty slate. That's how it works in a healthy brain. Now here's what happens in idiopathic hypersomnia. The adenosine doesn't clear properly. You sleep for 10 hours, 12 hours, and when you wake up, your brain still has elevated adenosine in key regions. You are chemically, biologically still asleep, even though your eyes are open. That's why the grogginess can last not 5 minutes like in a healthy person, but hours. It has a name: sleep inertia. And in idiopathic hypersomnia, it can be so severe that patients describe it as sleep drunkenness, confusion, poor coordination, an almost irresistible urge to go back to bed. Some people need multiple alarms set across the room. Some need another person to physically help them get up. This isn't laziness. This is a nervous system that can't complete its shutdown sequence. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because the adenosine story is only part of it. There's a second system involved, and understanding it leads us to the most promising new treatment on the planet. Deep in your hypothalamus, there are roughly 70,000 neurons that produce a chemical called orexin. Some textbooks call it hypocretin, Same thing. Orexin is your brain's wakefulness volume knob. It amplifies every wake-promoting signal in your brain simultaneously. More orexin equals more alert. Less orexin equals drowsy. Now, in narcolepsy, which is a different condition, those 70,000 neurons are destroyed. Gone. That's why narcolepsy causes sudden, uncontrollable sleep attacks. The volume knob is broken off entirely. But in idiopathic hypersomnia, the neurons are intact. The orexin system exists. It's just chronically underactivated. The volume knob is there, but it's stuck at 3 out of 10. Researchers recently proved this with an experiment that I think is genuinely remarkable. They gave IH patients a single dose of a drug that activates orexin receptors directly. Not a stimulant, not caffeine, a precision orexin activator. And within hours, patients who had been exhausted for years reported dramatic improvements in alertness. The system worked. It just needed the right signal. That drug is now in advanced clinical trials, and I'll tell you more about it in a moment, because it's one of the most exciting developments in sleep medicine in decades. But first, I want to show you one more piece of the puzzle, because it affects how you interpret your own sleep. When researchers run overnight sleep studies on IH patients, they find something counterintuitive. The deep sleep is there. The slow-wave sleep shows up on the recording. But the amplitude, the depth and intensity of those brain waves is significantly lower than in healthy sleepers. Think of it like charging a phone. Your phone might say it charged for 10 hours, but if the charger was running at 20% power, the battery is still half empty in the morning. That's what's happening with slow-wave sleep in IH. The charging is happening, but it's not reaching full power. So we have 3 interlocking problems. Adenosine that doesn't clear properly, an orexin system that's chronically underactivated, and slow-wave sleep that isn't reaching the restorative intensity the brain needs. This is why sleeping more doesn't fix it. You can't recharge a broken charger by plugging it in longer. Now, knowing all of this, let me walk you through 8 things you can actually do. Because while IH is a real neurological condition, there are both behavioral strategies and medical options that make a meaningful difference. And I'm going to give you both. Step 1. Stop trying to sleep your way out of this. I know that sounds backwards, but here's what happens when IH patients sleep 14 or 15 hours. They're spending more time in lighter sleep stages where adenosine doesn't clear efficiently, and they're starting the day with a longer runway of grogginess. A consistent wake time, even when exhausted, helps anchor the circadian component of your sleep and prevents the sleep inertia from spiraling. This isn't advice to sleep less. It's advice to stop treating more sleep as the cure. Work with a sleep specialist on your individual timing, but understand that more hours is not always better with this condition. Step 2, and this one has research behind it that I find genuinely compelling. Track your grogginess precisely. Not just, I slept 8 hours and felt tired. Specific. How long did it take you to feel functional after waking? Was it 20 minutes? An hour? 3 hours? Rate your alertness at noon on a scale of 1 to 5. Do this for 14 days. This data is what gets you taken seriously in a doctor's office, and what gets you referred to a sleep specialist instead of sent home with a pamphlet about sleep hygiene. I want to pause here because this step matters more than it sounds. The diagnostic delay for IH is 8 years, partly because patients describe their symptoms in vague terms. I'm just always tired, and doctors hear anxiety or depression. When you walk in with 2 weeks of documented grogginess duration, you're giving them objective data they can act on. Step 3. Request the right tests, because most doctors won't order them unless you ask. The gold standard diagnostic pathway for idiopathic hypersomnia is a 2-part test. First, an overnight polysomnography, which measures your brainwaves, breathing, and sleep stages while you sleep in a lab. Then, the following day, a multiple sleep latency test. 5 scheduled nap opportunities, 2 hours apart, measuring how quickly you fall asleep during the day. In IH, patients typically fall asleep in under 8 minutes during these nap tests, even after sleeping 10 or 11 hours the night before. That's the objective marker that gets you diagnosed. Without these tests, IH is invisible. With them, it's documented. A general practitioner will often not order these tests without prompting. You need to go to a sleep medicine specialist, or at minimum, ask your GP for a referral to one. Use the language, "I want to rule out a central disorder of hypersomnolence." That phrase tells a doctor you've done your research. Step 4. Cool your sleep environment tonight, because this is the one thing you can implement before you ever see a doctor. Research shows that ambient temperature around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 to 20 Celsius, optimizes slow-wave sleep depth. Your core body temperature naturally drops during non-REM sleep, and a cool room supports that process. Warmer rooms push you into lighter sleep stages where adenosine clears more slowly. This won't fix IH on its own, but it is genuinely one of the few environmental variables that affects slow-wave amplitude, which is exactly the component that's reduced in IH. So while you're navigating the medical pathway, this is a free, same-night optimization. Step 5 comes from what researchers call the ignored treatment in sleep medicine, and it's exercise, but not the way you've probably heard about it before. A meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials in adults showed that structured, consistent aerobic exercise, 3 to 4 times per week, sustained over several weeks, produces statistically significant improvements in sleep efficiency and slow-wave sleep in adults over 50. Not walking to the mailbox occasionally. Structured exercise. The mechanism matters here. Physical activity increases ATP expenditure during the day, which means more adenosine gets produced during waking hours through legitimate, activity-related channels. This may help anchor the homeostatic sleep pressure in a more normal range, even in a brain that isn't clearing adenosine efficiently. Beyond sleep quality, exercise also directly addresses the secondary effects of IH, the depression and anxiety that develop after years of undiagnosed exhaustion. Multiple meta-analyses show aerobic exercise reduces depressive symptoms comparably to antidepressant medication in mild to moderate cases. So you're addressing both the biological and emotional dimensions simultaneously. Step 6. Hydration. And I promise this isn't as obvious as it sounds. A pilot study examining fluid intake and objective sleep measurements found that in mildly dehydrated individuals, increasing water intake was associated with longer total sleep duration and increased REM sleep. These are preliminary findings, but the logic is sound. Dehydration affects blood volume, affects heart rate variability, affects the autonomic nervous system. And this matters more if you're over 50 and taking any kind of blood pressure medication, diuretic, or heart medication, all of which increase fluid losses. Mild chronic dehydration is extremely common in this age group and almost never comes up as a factor in sleep discussions. Keep a water bottle nearby throughout the day. Not because it cures IH, but because it removes one variable that's making everything worse. Step 7. Don't let another doctor tell you there's nothing to be done. Because there is a real treatment, and it was FDA approved in 2021. A drug called low-sodium oxybate, brand name XYWAV, became the first medication specifically approved by the FDA for idiopathic hypersomnia. In the pivotal clinical trial, patients saw an average 6 to 7 point reduction on the Epworth Sleepiness Scale, and 71% reported meaningful improvement in sleep inertia, the morning grogginess. That's the symptom most people consider untreatable. Modafinil is commonly used off-label for IH and shows similar efficacy in head-to-head trials, 8 to 10 point ESS reductions on average. Some patients respond better to amphetamine, dextroamphetamine. The right choice depends on your specific profile, your other medications, and your doctor's evaluation. But the one I want you to remember, the one that could change everything for this condition, is the orexin 2 receptor agonist I mentioned earlier. In early trials, a single dose produced remarkable improvements in alertness in patients whose orexin neurons were completely intact but chronically underactivated. Oral versions of this compound are now in late-stage clinical trials. If you have IH or suspect you do, this is worth tracking. Step 8, and I've been saving this one. This is the one that does the most damage when you get it wrong. The morning transition is the most neurologically vulnerable period in IH. This is when adenosine is still elevated, when the orexin system is at its weakest, and when the pull back to sleep is most powerful. And most people with IH make the mistake of snoozing, which drops them back into light sleep, reactivates sleep-promoting systems, and makes the grogginess dramatically worse when they finally do get up. Instead, multiple alarms spaced 8 to 10 minutes apart, not to snooze, as waypoints. When the first alarm hits, lights on immediately. Within 90 seconds, cold water on your face. Not comfortable, cold. The cold water activates your sympathetic nervous system and speeds up the adenosine clearance process in the frontal lobe, the exact region that controls alertness and executive function. This sounds simple, but for someone with severe sleep inertia, having a scripted, automatic protocol for the first 90 seconds of the day, lights, cold water, stand up, move, can cut morning grogginess duration by 30 to 60 minutes. Not because it fixes the underlying biology, but because it gives your nervous system a fighting chance to complete the transition. Now I want to address the 3 things that most often delay diagnosis and treatment. Because if you're sitting there thinking, this sounds like me, I don't want any of these to stop you from getting the help you need. The first barrier: doctors confusing IH with narcolepsy. These are genuinely different conditions. Narcolepsy involves sudden, irresistible sleep attacks. You might be in the middle of a conversation and collapse into sleep. It involves a phenomenon called cataplexy, where strong emotions trigger sudden muscle weakness. And it's caused by the physical destruction of orexin neurons. Idiopathic hypersomnia is a constant, unrelenting drowsiness, not episodic attacks. You feel tired all day, but you usually stay awake. The orexin neurons are intact. The treatment approaches are different. If a doctor tells you, this is just mild narcolepsy, that's a red flag. These are separate diagnoses with separate criteria. The second barrier: the advice to just sleep more. I understand why doctors say this. It sounds logical. But as you now understand, the problem in IH isn't sleep duration. It's the quality and the chemical clearance that happens during sleep. Sleeping 14 hours when your adenosine clearance is impaired means 14 hours of partial charging, not restoration. It often makes sleep inertia worse, not better. If a doctor tells you to simply go to bed earlier and sleep longer, that's not a treatment plan. That's a deflection. You deserve a proper diagnostic workup. The third barrier is perhaps the most common and the most damaging: being told this is just depression. It's true that many people with IH develop depression and anxiety, but longitudinal studies consistently show that the sleepiness comes first, and the mood disorders develop afterward as a response to years of undiagnosed disability, social isolation, and occupational struggle. Treating the depression matters, but treating the depression alone will not fix the underlying sleep homeostasis dysfunction. If you've been in therapy for years and you're still exhausted, it's worth asking whether there's a neurological component that hasn't been evaluated. The bottom line: if you recognize yourself in this video, you have the right to advocate for a proper sleep study. You have the right to ask for a referral to a sleep specialist. And you have the right to be taken seriously. Let me bring this together. Idiopathic hypersomnia is a real neurological condition where the brain's sleep pressure system fails to clear properly. The adenosine doesn't go away. The orexin system sits chronically underactivated. The slow-wave sleep lacks the restorative depth it should have, and the result is exhaustion that no amount of extra sleep will fix on its own. But there are real options now. XY-Wave, approved in 2021. Modafinil, widely available, and orexin-2 receptor agonists that could fundamentally change this condition within the next few years. The path starts with a proper diagnosis, And that path starts with you asking for the right tests. Now, I put everything from this video into a free guide called the Adrian Mercer Sleep Protocol. 7 days of evidence-based steps you can take at home, including the full morning grogginess protocol, the sleep diary template to bring to your doctor, and a checklist of exactly what to ask for at your next appointment. The link is in the description. Drop your email and I'll send it to you immediately. No cost, no catch. This is exactly the kind of practical tool I wish more people had when they were sitting in a doctor's office being told nothing was wrong. If you want to go deeper on how your circadian rhythm interacts with sleep pressure and why certain times of day are harder than others if you have IH, I have a video on circadian biology that I'll link below. That's the other half of the sleep system, and understanding both will help you work with your biology instead of fighting it. Tell me in the comments, how long has it taken you to wake up and feel functional in the morning? Is it 5 minutes, 30, 2 hours? I read every comment, and knowing where you are helps me make more relevant videos for you. Subscribe and hit the bell. New sleep science every Tuesday. I'm Adrian Mercer. Sleep well.